Hello, this is Valerie Moore from the Frederian Gazette. Thank you for spending your evening with us as we reenact the controversial book, Say I Sue Them Not, written by Kingsley Montevello, edited by Alexander Phillips, and narrated by Pepper Holloway. If you've enjoyed our program and want to support independent journalism, please donate to our Ko-Fi at ko-fi.com/the Frederian Gazette. And please leave a review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this episode. Reviews help other listeners find us and let us know that we're not just talking to ourselves. Content warnings for this episode include PTSD flashbacks, violent deaths, police violence, and colonial violence. This program has been sponsored by Mackenzley's Dot-O-Matic, the do-it-all cleaning master. Whether you need to dust a cobweb, sweep away broken glass, or remove that nasty stain, the Dot-O-Matic can do it all, and just for $59.99. For best results, pick up a bottle of Stain Be Gone today! We pass the mic to Pepper Holloway, who will be reading Episode 6, Gargain submits formal complaint against Prosecutor Page, trial put on hold for additional 2 months. April 14th, 1830. Father Duffy's Church, Sakhali Esprada, Kilbrada. Siegfried lives. Stand, my brethren! Stand for all who came before us and all who will come after! Siegfried encouraged, standing tall on top of Dijun's statue, the perfect target, the perfect rallying point. He held his revolver, his aim true, his scarf and trench coat stained with the smell of smoke and blood. The sickening sound of metal piercing flesh. Clang! Siegfried's smoking revolver tumbled to the bloody cobblestones as bullets pinned his spasming body to the statue, his head bowed down as if in prayer. Blood streamed down his chest, staining his white shirt and scarf. Siegfried! I wanted to cry. I wanted to scramble on top of the statue and pull him down and cradle his head to my chest as bullets flew around us. I wanted to bury my face into his wounds, my tears mingling with his blood, and I wanted to hold him until my love brought him back. It had to bring him back. We needed him. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. I couldn't do this without him. He was the only one who understood, the only one with the expansive vision that could see us to victory. He had to come back. I blinked, and I was sitting on the floor of a dry and surprisingly well-lit cellar. Kerry, in his tightly tailored white button-down shirt and emerald green vest, sat on an empty barrel rack. Their expertly and sharply folded tan suit jacket rested next to him on the rack. They sliced off pieces of dried meat with a paring knife and ate it. "You with me?" he asked after glancing my way. Who knows how many times they checked on me without a response. I'm returning. I'm sorry, I said, preparing to rise, but he gestured, sit, and handed me a piece of meat. Dried prosciutto, he said, the fanciest of the fancy. Hevian bribe? I asked, taking the offered meat tentatively. No, it's local. It's a well-known delicacy of the region. It's very good, I said, and he shared another slice. Has anyone else? No, and we can't stay much longer. We've stayed too long as it is. I frowned and finished a slice of prosciutto. Of all the days to have a mine fire, Kerry sighed. Is there any hope for the miners? Kerry shook their head. Not much. Eamon's been trying to form a union for the last year or so, but the Hevians fire union members and Griffin's forces kill the organizers. Eamon's been lucky, but he can only push his luck so many times before it fails him. Could the IFM help? Eamon wants us to, but the union leaders don't want to be associated with us, and I can't blame them. They're determined to retain their legitimacy by exercising the same rights Hevian workers have, and Hevian workers aren't allowed to rebel against their own government. Technically, they're not allowed to unionize either, I pointed out, and Kerry gave me a sad, knowing half-smile. I slowly rose and leaned against the stone wall. You all right? Yes, legs are stiff, but I'm all right. Was that your first action since Siegfried's Day? I paused and nodded, surprising myself with the answer. Strange how peaceful the last few months had been for the organization as a whole, while they were the worst months of my life. The first time is always rough. Tom told me. He told me Siegfried lives. I swallowed back tears as my cousin's voice echoed in my long ears. Do you know what that means? It came from your lot. he said, explaining further as I knitted my brows in confusion. Some of your propaganda traveled this way east, and the phase has been picked up as a rallying call. You know, don't let this dead of Siegfried's Day die in vain. I didn't know. Why didn't Dev tell me? It's just a slogan, Kerry shrugged. Would you say that if it was Sean Lives? I snapped, Kerry flinching either at my tone or the memory of his lost friend. I'm sorry, I stopped short as a blank section of the stone wall rumbled and shifted to the left. Kerry hopped up from the empty barrel rack and we drew our revolvers. One shot and then you run straight forward and through the door. I'll be directly behind you, Kerry quickly whispered as a figure emerged. Boris, don't shoot, it's me, Phil. For fuck's sake, Phil, said Kerry, slipping his revolver back into his holster. We could have killed you. What in Barris's name are you still doing here? Snapped Phil, carefully sliding the wall back in place. Have you lost all common sense, Kerry? I came here for information, Phil, and I'm not leaving here without it. Information! We've got Griffin's forces, pissed off 4 men, and as you can I... Our eyes widened and Kerry's face grayed. As you can I... Here... Why? They asked. Because they grew bored skinning demons in Endarium, Phil snapped, trying to herd us out of the cellar as I imagined one herded rebellious chickens. You need to leave immediately. Why are they here, Phil? Kerry demanded, and Phil sighed in exasperation. I don't know for sure, she admitted. They came with the business people who were interested in the proposed railroad, but the Adjutanai didn't leave with them. They hunt around, and unlike the Hevian mine owners and foremen, they have no problem walking through our streets or breaking into and investigating our houses. I had Frank redirect her latest shipment around Sakali. She's pissed, but I told her better a few weeks delay than being caught by the Adjutanai. Frank? I asked, blinking in surprise. Sandy's Frank? The pair looked at me uncertainly. When Sean, Devin, and Ernest were arrested, Sandy knew a fellow criminal named Frank who helped us rescue our friends. She disappeared after the rescue. I assumed she had either been rearrested or died. Sandy Kavanaugh, said Phil slowly. Yeah, I remember Frank mentioned him now and then. She's not dead, not yet, anyway. Instead of staying low, like I told her, she got entangled in the weapons and drug trade. Now she's traveling from Nusbante and Adamic to Densitas itself. She's trading drugs in the Dardanian capital, Kerry said. I told you. You told me she was trading weapons and drugs for Tasnim, and that's how you two were able to negotiate a lower price for our last few shipments. You didn't tell me that Frank is being tailed by the fucking Ajakanai. We don't know they're tracking her. They're most likely here looking for other Endariums. I doubt they'd expect Tasnim to work with non-Endariums. Great! So they're targeting our biggest and most reliable arms supplier. What do you want me to do? I'm trying to stay on Tasnim's good side. I'm trying to make sure Frank doesn't get herself killed. I'm trying to keep our people safe from Griffin's forces, and I got Eamon chewing on my ear, asking me to hand him some of our weapons for his non-existent union. I'm doing the best I can, Kerry. The pair sharply inhaled, and I interjected before they truly started fighting. It seems the ILA and IFM have renewed their alliance at the right time. Have we? Phil asked, and Kerry shot me a dirty glance. It's being considered. We have a contact within the Hevian government, I said. A contact who is currently working on returning our right to vote and sit in government. They would know the true purpose of the Ajakanai and the real reason the Hevians are pushing for a railroad. You can't trust a Hevian, Phil dismissed. Well, he's technically a Dardanian. Only slightly more trustworthy than a Hevian, Phil scoffed. Is he that connected? Kerry asked, and I nodded. He's the majority leader. Phil raised one ear in curiosity, and Kerry explained. How did you meet a Hevian like that? He found me, I shrugged, scratching my snout in sudden abashment. The Ajakanai, have they only been seen in East Braga? Said Kerry. That's what the reports say. You need to alert Marcus the moment someone sees them head westward, said Kerry, and Phil furrowed her eye ridges. What are you thinking? I asked. Marcus is the most powerful Alanist Ikatel since whatever his name was that created Alanism in the first place. Ristard, said Phil, slipping a hand into her pocket and clinging to something inside. St. Ristard Fitzgerald. Exactly. The last time an Ikatel of Marcus's charisma, leadership skills, and large following appeared in Kilbraga, the church was torn in two. Who knows what the paranoid and deluded crossnet bastards think Marcus is capable of? Phil frowned, and Kerry rolled their eyes halfway before catching himself and saying, Sorry, Phil. I'm going to be very excited when Marcus finally converts you. The expression on Kerry's face made it clear that he'd rather be descaled alive than convert to Alanism. Anything else you need to know, or can I finally convince you two to leave while you can? I wanted to explore the area on my own, see these business people for myself. No, that's impossible now, Phil commanded, seemingly taken aback by her own forcefulness. You're just gonna have to trust my reports. It's not that I don't trust. I know, but Eamon's gonna beat the war drums over the mine fire, which means I may have Griffin herself in Sockhill by tomorrow morning. I need you to get out of here before then. She gestured once more at us like we were disobedient chickens before smacking herself in the forehead. I'm embarrassed. I almost forgot. Kasneem wants us to do everything possible to prevent this railroad from being built. She's offered a normal amount of weapons and gold for bribing purposes. Gold? I gasped and Kerry swore. Did she know about the Ajakanai? They asked. Phil hesitated before admitting she wasn't surprised. Kerry twisted his snout and grumbled. A warning would have been appreciated. Phil helplessly shrugged. I'll let her know. I met Kerry's furious gaze as he ran the back of his hand across his snout. Figure out what she's up to, Phil, Kerry ordered, pointing at her. We can't afford to be pulled into whatever grievance she has with the Garganians and the Hevians. I'll try my best. My Throton's gotten better, but they speak at least 50 different languages in Adamic, and she speaks at least 10 of the 50. Ajakanai and no railroads. Mine fire. Anything else Marcus and I should know? No. Wait, one more thing. There's been an increase in the presence of armed Hevians because of the proposed railroad and Eamon's attempts at unionizing. Armed Hevians, not Griffin's people, Kerry asked. Not clear, Phil admitted. It could be Griffin's people trying to blend in, or self-appointed Hevians who want first crack at the jobs the railroad will open up. Boris, Phil, you're supposed to be defending the area, not watching it all go to shit, Kerry snapped, and Phil flinched. Kerry ran a hand over their bald head a few times before softening his tone and said, I'm sorry. No, you're right, said Phil, stiffening where she stood as if making a solemn mental vow. Margaret and Sean would descale me if they knew how fast things have unraveled without them. I gasped as if shocked. Another friend of Sean's. It shouldn't have surprised me. This was their home, after all. Gunfire, smoke, a hand in the chaos. My life in exchange for Sean's. He should have left me. He should have let me die. They would recognize you were trying your best, I said slowly, forcing myself to return to the here and now. Most of this is beyond any single being here, and yet we all have a role to play in the many solutions needed to free ourselves of colonizers and opportunists. Phil nodded with an appreciative glance, and Kerry gestured it was time to go. We exited through the tightly packed and multi-repaired church, and Phil stepped outside first, signaling that it was safe to come out. I was surprised to see that we were back in Sockhill village. The half-moon's faint light that peeked through the dark leaves illuminated enough to differentiate a hovel from a cluster of angry, arguing cartel gathered around low fire pits. Eamon's already been through, Phil whispered to us. This isn't going to end well. They should be angry, I said. Sealing that mine was pure murder. They don't stand a chance on their own, said Phil. Not if the owners call in Griffin. The sooner we kill the bitch, the better the world will be, Kerry said as we slipped from the back of one hovel to another. I grabbed his arm and pointed ahead. Look! Black smoke billowed from red and yellow glowing spots that peeked through the foliage that surrounded the village. What is that? Phil whispered. The mine, Kerry gasped. It's still on fire. Phil stared at Kerry. It's underneath the village? Eamon and Tom would know how extensive they've dug into Telemaker, but it seems so, said Kerry. Oh, fucking Boris, said Phil. What will happen to the village? I asked. If they can put the fire out, nothing, said Kerry. If they can't, they'll need to evacuate the village. Then Eamon's not wrong to be livid, I said, or to stoke righteous anger in others. Kerry! We jumped at the hiss that came directly behind us, and Phil swore magnificently. I'm fucking embarrassed, Tom. You're trying to help the Hevians by stopping all of our fucking arts? Sorry, Tom whispered, tugging on his lowered ears, but I need help. No! Phil hissed, raising her finger at Tom. Not again. Not this time. They need to get out of here. They've arrested Eamon, and a handful of miners, and a bunch of police just left the city jail. Phil's ears fell, and she shifted where she stood. I'll gather who I can and do what I can, Tom, but only after I get Kerry and Kingsley out of here. He doesn't have that kind of time. He's right, I said. You both know he's right. There are 4 of us, Kerry said. Phil sighed and scratched the top of her head. We could do it, Kerry persisted. Tom's never held a gun in his life. I've held a gun, Tom snapped before quietly adding, I've just never shot one. We have to try and quickly if we want to rescue him while he's still alive, I said. Phil relented and Tom led us first to an ancient and gnarly tree. After a few minutes of frantic digging by hand, we found a cache of 3 revolvers, 4 experimental, potentially handmade, handheld explosives, and ammunition. Tom explained Eamon started collecting weapons and storing them here for the strike he was desperately trying to organize. We took all the weapons with us, Kerry trusting only themselves with the explosives, to Phil's anxious horror. She tried arguing that the IFM would be neutered completely if Kerry accidentally blew himself up, but they ignored her and led us to the police station. The police station was a log building about a mile or so from the village, caught between Sathali and the mines. The completely square building stood in a grassy clearing, and the half moon provided enough cover to protect us from being seen. The building was so small, I assumed it only had 2 or 3 cells inside at the most. We approached the building from its rear. Phil, being the tallest of us, peered in through the lone barred window and held up 2 fingers for the 2 police officers inside. Good, the others hadn't returned yet. Kerry silently signaled that he and I would go first, with Tom and Phil bringing up the rear. We took a corner and then the next, Kerry and I flanking either side of the heavy, reinforced wooden doors. Tom joined me on my right, and Phil joined Kerry on their left. Kerry held up his hand. 5. We all cocked our revolvers. 4. Kerry and I shifted to the front doors. 3. I grabbed the door handle. 2. I swallowed and briefly closed my eyes, the smoke and streams of Siegfried's Day hovering in the back of my mind. Not here. Not now. 1. I threw the door open and we silently slid in. It took us barely a second to understand the situation. 2 police officers stood in front of us, one laughing and shouting taunts, while the other kicked a groaning, bloody mass lying on the floor. A pool of blood flowed from the mass, staining the leather shoes of the police officers and running towards the front door as if the floor of the prison wasn't level. The 5 other arrested minors huddled together in one of 2 cells in the entire building. Kerry and I fired, and the officers fell. They must have been halfway towards realizing we were even there before the bullets entered their brains, and by then it was too late. 1 bullet for each officer, 1 small hole in each of their foreheads. 1 small hole in each of their foreheads. Blood and brains spraying the wooden walls. Kerry stepped forward and searched the dead bodies for keys as I knelt before the bloody mass. Both of Eamon's horns were broken now, as well as his swollen snout and both of his hands. His clothes were torn and drenched in blood. They clearly beat him with their billy clubs and kicked at him and stomped on him and maybe even burned the soles of his feet and his armpits and under his snout, his scales a light brown and raised. I thought of Devon, Sean, and Ernest after we rescued them from nearly being executed, and that same overwhelming and ancient rage coursed through my veins once more. Is he alive? I jumped and realized Phil was kneeling beside me. Barely, I replied. Release the others, Kerry told Tom, throwing him the keys. They stood behind us, and their eyes flashed with a lethal wrath as they stared at Eamon. Are we too late? They asked. I don't know, I admitted, but we can't leave him. Is it safe to move him? Phil asked. Safer than leaving him here, said Kerry. Where's your closest doctor? If they're not still at the mine treating the wounded miners. Fine, we'll take Eamon to Zir Hovel. Maybe Z have supplies there we can use to stabilize Eamon's condition until Z return. You 2 carry him, Tom and I will provide support. Phil and I lifted Eamon as gently as we could, but I'll admit we probably caused more pain and harm than if we left him. We took 2 steps forward when my eyes fell on a lit lantern filled with oil. The Hevians hadn't bothered to lay gas or electric lines in Kilbraga, and so we were still reliant on candles and oil lamps if we wanted to see after the sunset. I grabbed the lantern and helped Phil carry Eamon to the front door. Hold him for a moment, I told her as I detangled myself from the union organizer and stood in the prison doorway. What are you... I answered her by throwing the oil lamp into the wooden building, the glass shattering, spreading oil and fire over the dirty, bloody floor. The fire licked and ate through the wood and crawled over the bodies of the dead police officers, and I was confident it would burn the building down. A reminder that they can also burn, I said as I dragged Eamon's arm over my shoulder. We carried Eamon's body to the doctor's hovel and found it empty. We treated Eamon's wounds the best we could until the doctor returned close to 3 a.m. As soon as they saw us, they sighed and asked who was hurt and how bad were the wounds. They actually gave a cry of horror when they saw Eamon and spent most of the night treating him. The Zay were still tending to Eamon's wounds when Phil led Kerry and I back to our bicycles at 6 a.m. You've just heard Gargain submits formal complaint against Prosecutor Page, trial put on hold for an additional 2 months from Say I Sue Them Not by Kingsley Montevello. Tonight's episode was read by Pepper Holloway and was sponsored by Kensley's Dot-O-Matic. Relax and let the Dot-O-Matic do all your household chores. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Fredarian Gazette, and go to our website, www.fredariangazette.com, for episode extras. Feel free to send us any questions you have about the podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Join us next Monday at 5 p.m. for Episode 7, Choi & Sons Railroad Company refuses to share boats with the prosecution.